Well, I would say that it mostly has to do, I think, with the new administration in the United States. I mean, it seems like that all the regional players in the Middle East are actually kind of like, first, are looking to see what will be Biden's policy in the region, and second, everyone is trying to get a better card, sort of speaking, towards the change expected in the region. As we all know, Trump administration was very not friendly to the Palestinians. It was clearly standing on Israel's side. It's not a political statement. It's an objective observation. And so in that context, the Palestinians obviously are not sad that Trump lost the elections. And now they're preparing themselves to the new era in Biden times. And when you look at the whole regional factors that are involved around and beyond the scenes of that story of the Palestinian elections, you could easily see the fingerprints of two major players in the region. One is Egypt, the other one is Turkey. And that is very interesting because the two are on a kind of like conflictual track for a long period of time in many aspects, but all of a sudden they join hands together in the context of the Palestinian elections. The major reason for that is that they have common denominator, I mean Egypt and Turkey, and that is that they both want to be viewed by the Biden administration as a kind of like positively contributing factor, because they assume that they are going to have some rough times or turbulence times with Biden administration, mostly around the story of human rights and other things that are on top the priority of the new administration in the States.
But
so
do you think these elections will actually take place? It's not the first time the Palestinian leadership has declared their intention to holding elections. So far, it's never happened since 2005.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it can easily join about most of the Palestinians and most of the people in the Arab world will ask exactly the same question. The answer is somewhat anywhere between, yeah, maybe, and mostly skepticism. As you accurately mentioned before, you know, the split between Fatah and Hamas is deep. It's non-reconcilable, sort of speaking, in many ways. And by the way, note that while they are meeting in Cairo, and by the way, they're supposed to meet, I mean, the Palestinian factions are supposed to meet soon in Cairo again to discuss more about these upcoming elections. One thing that they are not going to discuss is how exactly they are going to reconcile. The reason they don't touch it is because this is very hot potato, not hot potato. So when you look at and I kind of like was following for the last 24 hours, the reactions in the Palestinian arena, you could easily detect once you move aside all the rhetoric and all the congratulations and the rosy announcements, you could easily pick up the sense of realism and I would even say some quite dominant skepticism.
It's difficult to envisage, isn't it, at this juncture at least, Hamas allowing Fatah to openly organize and campaign throughout the Gaza Strip, and vice versa in the West Bank, that Fatah would allow Hamas to freely operate and to get out the vote in the West Bank.
Yes, and on top of that, we have to remember something significant. I mean, the Palestinian Authority, one of the legal base of the existence of the Palestinian Authority is the formal recognition in the State of Israel, which was signed between the two sides. Now, if you will get tomorrow morning a Palestinian parliament that is actually dominated by Hamas, and they will pass a resolution the day after to abolish the Oslo Agreement, well, you know, you find yourself in a very kind of like cul-de-sac, sort of speaking. But I also think that, you know, it's like I think that both Hamas and the Palestinians doing that maneuvering, sort of speaking, and they are looking at Washington. Obviously, one of the major issues to follow is that already by now they kind of like play with the issue of whether Jerusalem will be included in the elections or not. I can see the Palestinian interest actually to kind of like mass Israel in that story, because one of the major challenges of the Palestinians is that as long as Trump was in power, they could always say, look, Trump is totally against us, Trump is not supporting two-state solution, Trump is pro-Israel, and all these things were correct. But now comes a new administration that says, we are for the states two-state solution, and as part of that, we expect the sides to conduct concessions and compromises, which, to a large extent, actually, the Palestinians are unable to do. So that put the Palestinians in a very difficult situation, because then they could not claim only Israel and Trump are responsible, because now there is a new administration in the United States. So I think that this is a kind of like a preemptive attempt of the Palestinian Authority to sort of like put Israel in the niche. In
the sense that Israel would say no elections in East Jerusalem, therefore the Palestinians can say, okay, no elections.
Correct. I think that they are playing the card of East Jerusalem. When I've been following the statements for the last couple of days, the interviews and so on. It's very much out there. They kind of like all of them. Hamas emphasized the story of East Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority emphasized the story of East Jerusalem, and so on and so on. So I would say, when you look at the whole components, the whole ingredients of this cake, as I mentioned before, you can see why there are some serious reasons to doubt to what extent this is for real. That being said, I do want to emphasize that I do believe that there is an inner discussion within the Palestinians, particularly as an outcome of the story of the Abraham Accords and the changes of the geostrategic landscape of the Middle East. And there is, I could see this discussion. It has been around and now it's growing inevitably. And that is the discussion that I, roughly speaking, could define as pragmatism versus dogmatism. And in the end of the day, the Palestinians are basically have to address this question, because that question comes from the Arab world to the Palestinian and from the Palestinians themselves. And they are facing the simple question, where exactly do you want to go? Do you want to take a Hamas path, which is obviously leading to a certain direction, or do you want to take another path that leads to a different direction? And in that sense, the story of the elections, the discussion around the elections, the buzz that it results, in that sense, it is significant. But one way or another, I think that no one has an illusion. We're not going to see a Palestinian reconciliation tomorrow morning, as you said before, accurately.
And I think the question of Palestinian pragmatism against dogmatism has been the key question in Palestinian politics since the 1920s.
That is quite correct.
Final question. Let's assume we're wrong and the Palestinian elections do actually take place. Do you expect Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, to be a candidate for president again? He's already, 85, 86?
Yes, he's around it. I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like that in addition to the all factors that we mentioned, high politics and so on, I think we have to look, in the end of the day, at people. It's about egos and people and power struggle. So, for example, you see the role of, on the one hand, Jibril Rajoub, the Palestinian Authority side, and Salah al-Aouri on the other side. Remember, Hamas is also heading elections this year. So it's very clear that figures are trying to take better place in the front line. We have to remember the story of Mohammed Dahlan, who is also kind of like in the picture.
Sitting and waiting in Qatar.
Yes, I mean, look, everyone is kind of like preparing themselves to post Abbas days. It could be tomorrow morning or it could be post the elections, but it's around the corner. And everyone is kind of like preparing themselves to that, particularly, of course, in Fatah, but not only in Fatah. And I would say that this is, in my mind, this whole story of the elections also have to do with that aspect, meaning the inner political configuration, different figures that are trying to get a better seats in front of the stage or on the stage. So that's part of that story.